In the autumn of 1940, if you were walking down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, past the towering Art Deco majesty of Rockefeller Center, you wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. It was a city of noise, a city of commerce. But if you took the elevator up to the 36th floor and walked down a quiet, wood-paneled hallway, you would come to a door labeled British Passport Control. To any passerby, it was a room full of bored clerks, ink stamps, and travel forms. It looked like the most forgettable office in New York. But that door was a masterpiece of misdirection. Behind it lay a sprawling intelligence complex that did not officially exist. It was a labyrinth of 3,000 people, writers, code-breakers, forgers, and psychologists. They were overseen by a man who had been sent personally by Winston Churchill. Their mission was not to steal secrets, but to manufacture them. They weren't there to blow up bridges. They were there to blow up the American mindset. At this exact moment in history, Britain was standing on the edge of an abyss. London was being turned to charred rubble. Churchill knew the cold, hard arithmetic of survival. Without America, England would cease to exist. But the American people were silent. 80% of the population wanted the gates locked and the lights turned off. This is the story of how a secret office in the heart of New York City rewired the brain of an entire nation. It is the story of the original information war. To understand the scale of the lie, we first have to understand the man the British needed to destroy. His name was Charles Lindbergh. In 1940, Lindbergh wasn't just a celebrity, he was a secular saint. 13 years earlier, he climbed into a single-engine plane called the Spirit of St. Louis and flown alone across the Atlantic. He had conquered the darkness and the distance with nothing but a compass and absolute faith in himself. When Lindbergh spoke, 60 million people listened. He was the voice of the America First Committee. His argument was simple. He told Americans that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were impenetrable moats. He argued that Hitler was a European monster that the Europeans should handle.
These wars in Europe are not wars in which our civilization is defending itself against some Asiatic intruder. There is no Genghis Khan or Xerxes marching against our Western nations. This is simply one more of those age-old struggles within our own family of nations.
As long as Lindbergh held the microphone, Britain was dead. Winston Churchill knew he couldn't beat Lindbergh in a fair fight. He needed a shadow. He chose a Canadian millionaire named William Stephenson. His code name was Intrepid. Stephenson was the polar opposite of Lindbergh. Lindbergh was tall, blonde, and lived in the blinding light of public adoration. Stephenson was a small, quiet man who preferred the corners of rooms. He was a man who said almost nothing at dinner parties. Guests often forgot he was even there 5 minutes after meeting him. This wasn't a personality flaw, it was a weapon. William Stephenson didn't work in a vacuum. He had a secret partner in the highest office in the land, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This is the most uncomfortable chapter of the story. Roosevelt wanted to save Britain, but he was a politician in a democracy where his voters hated the idea of war. He knew that if he moved too fast, he would be impeached. He needed someone else to move the needle for him. FDR reached a gentleman's agreement with Stephenson. He essentially gave a foreign intelligence agency permission to run psychological operations against his own citizens. He told the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, to let the British spies operate on American soil. Hoover was a man who obsessed over rules and jurisdiction. He was livid. He opened a massive file on Stephenson, documenting every violation of federal law, every illegal wiretap, every forged document. But every time Hoover tried to shut room 3603 down, a call came from the White House. Stand down, let them work. How do you change the fundamental beliefs of 130 million people who do not want to change? You don't tell them what to think. You change the world they see. Stephenson's team used the 5 pillars of manipulation. Pillar 1, the media infiltration. The BSC created a shell company called the Overseas News Agency. To a reader in a small town in Kansas, it looked like a legitimate international wire service, but every single story it produced was carefully crafted in room 3603. Pillar 2, the radio war. In the 1940s, the radio was the heart of the home. The BSC identified pro-British commentators and boosted them. They provided them with secret intelligence and pre-written talking points. But they also played dirty. If an isolationist speaker was gaining too much ground, the spies would start rumors about their personal lives. Pillar 3, the forged map. In October 1941, the president spoke to the nation over the airwaves and announced he had a secret map. It supposedly showed Berlin's plan to carve up South America into 5-axis colonies and build air bases for a direct strike on Miami.
I have in my possession a secret map made in Germany by Hitler's government, by the planners of the New World Order. It is a map of South America and a part of Central America as Hitler proposes to reorganize it. Today in this area, there are 14 separate countries. But the geographical experts in Berlin have ruthlessly obliterated all existing boundary lines. They have divided South America into 5 vassal states, bringing the whole continent under their domination. And they have also so arranged it that the territory of one of these new puppet states includes the Republic of Panama and our great lifeline, the Panama Canal. That is his plan. It will never go into effect.
That map was a total fabrication. It was created by BSC forgers in Manhattan using authentic German paper and ink they had stolen from a consulate. The map did what 1,000 speeches couldn't. It made the war feel local. Pillar 4, the science of opinion. Stephenson was a pioneer of using data as a weapon. By subtly changing the wording of questions, his team manufactured a sense of momentum. They published slanted polls to make isolationists feel like they were a shrinking, lonely minority. Pillar 5, front groups. The British funded dozens of grassroots organizations, groups with names like the Fight for Freedom. The checks were signed in room 3603. Just days after Pearl Harbor, William Stephenson established a top-secret facility on a remote stretch of Lake Ontario. It was known simply as Camp X. This was the first secret agent training school in North America. It was a bridge between the British Special Operations Executive and the brand new American intelligence services, here, in the mud and the cold. The students were taught the dark arts of modern warfare. They learned the Fairbairn system of silent killing. They learned how to derail trains, how to forge passports, and how to use a massive high-speed radio transmitter codenamed Hydra to bounce coded messages across the Atlantic. Among the students was a young commander named Ian Fleming, the man who would later give the world James Bond. He watched as Stephenson's instructors turned quiet accountants and lawyers into lethal shadows. Camp X was the proof that the Manhattan Project of the Mind wasn't just about words. It was about creating a new kind of soldier, a soldier who fought in the darkness, using weapons the American public didn't even know existed. Before we move into the endgame of this operation and the naval incident that finally brought the two nations to the brink, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching. Stories like these, hidden in the declassified archives of history, take a massive amount of research to bring to life. If you find value in these deep dives into the Nightshift Chronicles, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. It is the single best way to support the channel and ensure we can keep uncovering these forgotten chapters of our past. And if you're enjoying the cinematic noir style of this documentary, let us know in the comments which historical mystery you want us to tackle next. Now, back to the front lines. By mid-1941, the psychological climate of America had shifted. The fear of Hitler was slowly beginning to outweigh the trust in Lindbergh. But Stephenson knew that persuasion wasn't enough. He needed an incident. He needed blood. He operated on a dark philosophy. Anger moves faster than logic. In September 1941, a German U-boat fired a torpedo at an American destroyer called the USS Greer. The news hit the headlines like a lightning bolt. Roosevelt went on the air and told the public that the Germans had committed piracy against an innocent American ship. What the public was not told was that the Greer was not innocent. It had been tracking that submarine for over 3 hours, broadcasting its location to a British aircraft that was dropping depth charges. The German sub had fired in desperate self-defense. Then came the final blow to Charles Lindbergh. In a speech in Des Moines, Iowa, a frustrated Lindbergh finally broke. He accused influential groups of pushing America into war. The BSC machine was ready. They pounced, labeling him a pariah. Within 48 hours, the man who had been a god in 1927 saw his movement dissolve. The wall around America was finally coming down. But there is a final darker file in the BSC archives. For decades, a question has lingered in the corridors of Bletchley Park and room 3603. Did Stephenson know? As the Japanese fleet moved toward Hawaii, the British Intrepid network was at its peak. Some argue the greatest secret they ever manufactured was silence. If Churchill knew the Pacific was about to explode, telling Roosevelt would have been a gamble. Letting it happen was a certainty. It was the ultimate gentleman's agreement, the price of American entry paid in battleships and blood. But William Stephenson did not pack his bags and go home. After the war, he stayed to help train the first generation of American intelligence officers. He helped build a facility called Camp X, where he taught the students how to plant stories, how to forge documents, and how to manipulate public opinion. The techniques perfected in room 3603 became the foundational blueprint for the CIA and the Cold War. We are left with a haunting ethical arithmetic. William Stephenson was lying in service of a truth. He manipulated a democracy to save that democracy. But the machine he built never stopped. The tools of room 3603 are still running today. amplified by digital algorithms. It is a reminder that the most important battles in history aren't always fought on fields of mud and wire. Sometimes they are fought in the quiet amber light of a Manhattan office, where the truth is just another piece of paper waiting to be rewritten. This is the Nightshift Chronicles.